Rabbi Abraham Cooper, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you back on the show.
Thank you. It's an honor.
Right now, all eyes are on San Francisco, where President Biden is meeting with Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping. How do you view this meeting?
Well, you have the official items that are on the list. They're, of course, all important. And talking about the impact on climate, pollution, and the future of the planet, it's critically important. We're also looking for a different climate change. And that's a change in the nefarious approach of the current regime, the Chinese Communist Party, and its assault on religious groups and minorities, obviously starting with the Uyghurs, who are suffering the most, but you also, of course, have the Tibetans. And I can recall just a few years ago when I was in Jerusalem at an international gathering of Christians and Jews, that 3,000 Chinese Christians came to Jerusalem for that event. I don't think 3 of them could come today. You have the forced closure, you have sometimes the destruction of churches, you have a pressure on the content of sermons, et cetera, and we'll have to see whether it's brought up and in the pecking order of issues raised, whether it's just brought out with one foot out the door or it's made a part of the central policy. And I just like sort of to point out historically, this isn't the first time that the Wiesenthal Center and other human groups are urging a president of the United States to take on parallel multiple issues. During the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union, which is basically Russia, they had years of negotiations and discussions on trying to bring down the level of the nuclear threat. But eventually the U.S. at all of these meetings would also bring up the human rights situation inside the Soviet Union. And eventually it made a huge difference. Most people in Asia, maybe all countries, people respect strength. And strength is not only measured in how many missiles you have and what size Navy, but it's also a matter of your moral GPS.
Rabbi, the White House also touched on AI technologies and, the nuclear threats. But when it comes to human rights, not just inside China, but even here in America, the Chinese Communist Party has been described as a transnational criminal organization, including repression overseas. What would you like to see the U.S. touch on in that aspect?
Well, I wouldn't say I was victim of a criminal act, but I was last year here at the campus of University of Southern California during a memorial program for Chinese citizens who died in a fire, having been locked in during COVID, that the 200 or so Chinese students who were there all wore full face masks. And that's when it hit me that the reason they were doing so is they were afraid about facial recognition and what might happen to their families back home. I was just at an international conference on behalf of the Uyghurs in Tokyo, met with Japanese officials. They also have problems of Chinese police and other methods in order to strong-arm Chinese citizens and expats all over the world, which they can now do a lot more powerfully, unfortunately, with the use of AI and other technologies. So again, in each of these areas, it's not that these other issues aren't important, but the American administration, Japan, UK, France, Canada, they need to start intermingling and weaving the human rights issues into the economic and geopolitical issues.
And Rabbi, we're seeing calls from the Uyghur population, Tibetans, House Christians, and also the Falun Gong spiritual discipline calling on President Biden to send a strong message to Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping when it comes to human rights. What is that message that the U.S. should be sending?
I think the message needs to be sent is that we're not only committed to human rights at home here in the United States, and we're so lucky to have these freedoms, but these are now, they're embedded in universal action. And think about it, so much of the discussion is about cooperation, about technology and harnessing the environment in the right direction, all important goals. So you cannot say No. We're only going to talk about what's inside your borders if it comes to human dignity. But when it comes to controlling CO2 emissions, then we can talk about what's going on all over the world. You know, there is a pollution of the environment, and then there's a moral pollution. So when the U.S. shows also its moral backbone, it impacts in a positive way across the board. And without the United States fronting on these issues, the signal that will be taken by the Chinese communists is they don't really care very much, and we could just continue our pernicious policies in this area without much worry.
Definitely a lot at stake here. Rabbi Abraham Cooper, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure.